I've played tons of games on the Super Nintendo, but not as many as I would like. One cool thing about exploring the library is that I know what to expect from the system, and today I wanted to talk about my top 10 easiest games. Now when I say top 10, I mean out of all of the easy games that are out there, these are the ones that I would recommend. Games that are just good, clean, simple fun where you can pick up a controller and create a memory for yourself or for your kids. Now I know difficulty is subjective, and in the past I've stirred up some controversy. Here's to you, Cobra Triangle. So please do be patient with me. I'm just a boy. And as before, we're not going to be including any edutainment games or novelty games that just act as a gimmick, so you're not going to see Mario Paint in this list, okay? Let's begin. I love compilations, especially when those compilations feature games from a previous generation with subtle quality of life improvements. For those of you who don't know, Super Mario All-Stars is kind of like the catch-all for folks who really enjoyed the NES era of the Mario franchise. And as a compilation, it captures all of that same magic of 4 different games, such as Super Mario Bros. 1 through 3, as well as the Lost Levels, which is the original Japanese version of Super Mario 2, which I prefer to the American release anyway. The graphics get a major overhaul, the controls feel slightly tighter, but that just might be me. The soundtrack was remastered, and by the way, if you do check out those Lost Levels, they made it slightly easier in comparison to the Japanese version as well. Now there was a 25th anniversary edition of this, but it didn't really do it for me. I'd rather the Snes game any day. Out of all the JRPGs I've wanted to play but never got around to, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is at the top of that list. There's tons of JRPGs I could suggest to someone who just kind of wanted to dip their toes into the genre, but if someone came up to me and asked for the equivalent of baby's first JRPG, then you kind of have to mention Mystic Quest, because it truly is a simple, entry-level JRPG that holds your hand just enough to be fun, but not overbearing. Another 2 JRPGs I would recommend for entry-level JRPGs that are slightly more difficult would be Breath of Fire from Capcom and Square's Chrono Trigger. This racing game is massive fun for folks who like it. I personally don't, but like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I am biased towards Mario Kart 64. But I do have to commend this game for creating an entire subgenre of racing games, one that still thrives to this day, and for a while, more so around the 5th generation, paved the way to my childhood frustrations with Crash Team Racing and Diddy Kong Racing. Super Mario Kart is even more fun if you play it with a friend, because as long as somebody places high enough, the game continues. If you own a Super Nintendo, this is one that should be in your library. When you think of easy, look no further than Kirby. From a design standpoint, HAL Labs has always ensured that the Kirby series was approachable to the child demographic, and almost every game they've created has been a cakewalk. My kids love Kirby because it's a game that they feel they can just play, and when you see the glow of a child's eyes because in their mind they are accomplishing something, that's not something that's easy to replicate. That's 100% an inside behavior, intrinsic behavior. So shout out to HAL for creating something so trivial yet simple. The Super Nintendo had a few major staples when it came to genres. To me, those were platformers, adventure games, RPGs, and beat-em-ups. If you have the patience to learn the mechanics of any of the beat-em-up games on the Super Nintendo, they can be viewed as easy because you can just breeze through them. And for me, Final Fight is one of many that you can just veg out and enjoy. The game was originally designed to be a Street Fighter game, specifically Street Fighter 89, but thanks to Double Dragon and the international attention towards the newer genre, the whole framework was changed. We play as Guy, a modern-day ninja, Cody, a generic white guy who loves to fight, and Hager, a former pro wrestler turned mayor of the city. Now Hager's daughter was kidnapped, so what do? We leave the administrative office, shut the door, lock it, and proceed to beat the fuck out of everyone. Which as a dad, I find to be kind of relatable. As with most beat-em-ups from Capcom, it did go to the wayside, which kinda sucks. The most recent entry, Final Fight Streetwise, was shit. It was horrible, lackluster at best. Honestly, I would tell you to just pretend the franchise died with Final Fight 3 or Final Fight Revenge if you prefer actual fighting games. Every time I play this, or even hear the name Yoshi's Island, two things happen in my mind. Two things. Number one, I laugh because of this meme I saw where it's like a fat Yoshi walking and all of a sudden he goes, and number two, I look at my children and thank them personally with a handshake for not being a fucking tool like Baby Mario. Yoshi's Island is a charming, witty, and fun game, and while it does have some levels that may take a little bit more creative thinking than I would like, especially from a Mario game of this era, it is tremendous fun. I will say, I could have gone without Baby Mario, period, but all Mario games thrive on the concept of gimmicks, and sure, why not? Protect the baby, throw your eggs, enjoy the crayon art style and the difficulty, which luckily for you, isn't too bad. Yoshi himself is virtually indestructible, and once you understand how to protect Baby Mario and recover him if you get hit, you'll be good to go. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, due to its cultural importance, was an obvious choice for companies to just milk that titty dry. And Mighty Morphin Power Rangers alone had 5 different games created. The outlier is the Sega CD version, which is an FMV game, while the Genesis was a one-on-one fighting game. The rest were beat-em-ups, of which are not only incredibly short, they are fairly easy in comparison to other games in the genre. And guess what? Chalk another game up for Natsume because they developed it. I swear, I never thought I would find such a sleeper company after all of these years that I never even knew existed that would consistently crank out bangers. It's incredible. I want to take the time to give you a little bit of a life lesson. This is a mantra I tell myself and I tell my kids because it's important for us as adults as well. Everyday living is another day learning. Never stop learning. Go out there and experience all of these games. The worst thing that happens is you don't like it, but at least you know about it. Never stop learning. Trust me. Super Mario World is the quintessential Super Nintendo game, and it was likely the first platforming game you checked out on a platform. Chalk it up to being a pack-in game, which if you're going to pack in a game, make sure it's a good one. Nintendo didn't disappoint. The reason it's on this list is because it's not only forgiving, but it's kind of easy. You have so many opportunities to get power-ups throughout the stage. Now, obviously not as much as Super Mario 3, where you can kind of hoard them into World 8, but enough to make it through the game with minimal skill. The most abstract part of the game, to me, was finding the secret exits, which don't really play a role until that annoying forest section. It's just one of those games you can pick up, play, put down, and return to whenever you're ready. This game exudes the idea of, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in my house, wanna come play with me? Something I heard quite often in the mid-90s. I had a buddy who had this game, and after suffering through my mandatory Catholic indoctrination services, I would go over to his house and we'd play Turtles in Time. Now, the cool thing about beat-em-ups to me is that they tend to not only be more fun with friends, but also sort of easier. So if you want not only a good couch co-op to play with your friends on a literal system or over the computer with programs like Parsec, this is a great time. I can't suggest it enough. Plus, in comparison to the arcade game, we get extra stages on the Super Nintendo version, which is something I always find to be a good nod towards your consumers. Disney games, for the most part, are easy. I almost put Goof Troop on this list, but I felt that there were more practical games that could be placed on it, right? Aladdin in particular was an IP that was released on a few different consoles, usually developed by different companies. Virgin Games did the Nintendo Entertainment System version, Jaguar Software did Amiga and DOS ports, and Crawfish Interactive did Game Boy Color, with Sega handling the Genesis version. But to me, the best iteration of it was Capcom's on the Super Nintendo. It's a side-scroller as is expected, and it's incredibly easy to me. Now, there is one part that might staple your nuts to your inner thigh, and that's the cave escape. But outside of that, it's a solid game. As one of the best compilations on the Super Nintendo, it's also one of the easiest. Kirby Superstar is an 8-game anthology. It has a remake of the original Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Land, a racing game, Gourmet Race, a Metroidvania called The Great Cave Offensive and Arena, 2 sub-games, and 3 story-based campaigns, Dynablade, Revenge of Meta Knight, and Milky Way Wishes. So in essence, you have an easy game that has tons of different modes to play to fit whatever style of game that you want to enjoy that day. And that's a really cool thing to have that variety at your fingertips anytime you wish. Plus, it's a banger. I find it to be much better than Kirby Superstar Ultra, which has 12 modes. And that's it for today. I know today's list might have some games you expected to see, so I hope that my little guided journey through a brief moment of your childhood was decent enough to make you smile, and maybe remind you of a time when life was just a little bit easier to live. In the comments section below, feel free to tell me how wrong I am. I actually enjoy discussing our individual perspectives on these moments in history. And I do reply to every single comment, even the mean ones. Also, if you don't mind, please consider hitting the subscribe button, because if you took the time to watch this video, you're home already in this community. We're a bunch of people who really love retro gaming. You belong here, and I'm glad to have you here. Finally, hit that thumbs up button so that my video can enter a beat 'em up pit fighter style competition with the videos on the right of your screen. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortifire out.